Hello, this is Joe. I'm going to recreate the Erasmus Bridge photo with which I won first place at the International Photography Awards in 2014. A photo that took me several weeks to come to the final result, apart from creating the selections that took me roughly 6 to 8 hours to create. I already have the selections made, so I'm just checking them for residual noise and white lines. I'm going to clean it up because, as I've explained in the previous video tutorial, you always need to get rid of the residual white noise and lines that can be, let's say, a side effect when you're trying to create a good mask. And I would do that with the brush set to overlay mode and 100%. So you can easily go over to pure white spots without affecting them. You will only affect the residual noise that you see in your mask. So always get rid of them before starting out with the panel for more accurate and more pleasing results. So I'll start out with the black and white conversion. Going to merge the layer down, and then I'm going to start out with darkening the sky. And I do that with my global adjustments with the low key preset. Set it to extreme, and then apply, and then before I do it again, because I want to have a really dark sky, I would add a little bit of noise to prevent banding, because the thing is that if you push the contrast too much, especially when you are working with photos with uniform blue skies, it's going to result in some additional banding that doesn't look good. So I'm going to get rid of the banding by adding a little bit of noise through Photoshop. So I've done that. Now I can go on with the next step, and that's to darken the sky even more with the low key preset. Before I continue with the post-processing of the Erasmus Bridge, first a quick intermezzo about the low key preset and the darkening of skies in photo. What's behind the low key preset is a very specific use of the curves tool in Photoshop. Usually people would darken skies like I'm showing you as follows, sometimes even creating an S-curve. If you darken skies like that and leave the contrast in, then the eyes will always be drawn to the sky instead of to the bridge. As you might know, the eyes are always drawn to the areas with the highest contrast and brightest values in an image. I want people to look at my main object, which is the bridge and not the sky. So the bridge should always have the highest contrast relative to its background and surrounding, and also have the brightest values, not my sky. This is a mistake that many people would make when darkening skies, and that is to leave the contrast in there and even increasing it instead of removing it and only darkening the sky. And you can darken the sky effectively by cutting off the highlights like you do here. So what you do then is basically darken the sky and also remove the contrast just by cutting off the highlight like this in with the curves tool. So that is a proper way of darkening skies, by cutting off the highlights and making the curve with the curves tool. So that's what's behind the low key preset in the panel. So that's that. Apply, and so I'm going to call it sky so I can show you before and after later on. So now I'm going to darken sky even more, but now I'm going to go straight to creating depth, because if you want to darken skies like this, then I would always recommend to use the presets in creating depth. So I'm going to just darken it a few times with the large preset and with D1 and D2. Do the same from bottom to top with D2, and you see that the sky is darkened without having too much contrast in it, because as you know, I want the bridge to be the main object from image. So I want people to look at my bridge, so it should have the highest contrast and the brightest values, not my sky, because it's just a background, a nice and solid background. And as you can see here, there's no noise, there's no banding in the image, even though if you look at the video, it may look like there's some banding in the sky, but that's just the video quality. It has nothing to do with the photograph. So now I'm going to do the same with the water. I'm going to darken it to roughly match the sky. And again, going to do that with gradient depth, because the gradients result in much better darkened surfaces like water or skies or even buildings. So after I've done that, I'm going to merge it down, call it water. So before and after, and you can see it roughly matches the tonal range of the sky. Over there is a lighter area that I want to darken, that part, so I can easily do that with the advanced adjustment. You just need to create a rough quick selection and then go with D1 or D2, and it will result in a darkened part of the water that subtly blends in with the rest of the image. So no strange transitions or edges, just darkened part of the water. And if you look on the left bottom corner, you see that that part is also a little bit too dark. So what I'm going to do is to remove that with the microzones. So I take a few samples over there, and so it should be zone 0. I'm going to activate it. By the way, the explanation of the microzones and the advanced adjustments are all explained in the previous video tutorials on the Black and White Artisan Pro panel. Please refer to those videos if you want to know more about the use of the microzones and advanced adjustments. And as you can see, it's the dark corner has been removed quite effectively. So basically I was decreasing the contrast in the water, and that's why I've used the microzones feature for that. Before and after. And I can assure you, if you look at it on my screen instead of over video, you would see that there's no banding at all, and it looks much more subtle than it appears to look like on video. So now I'm going to darken the cables. And again, I want to darken the cables and at the same time removing the contrast, because I just want to darken them. I don't want to darken them and create a high contrast cable. So I'm going to remove the edges, the selection edges, so you can see better what I'm doing. So again, I'm going to go with the low key preset, my favorite preset of the global adjustments section. I'm going to do it again to make it even darker, like that. Again, remove the selection edges so you can see better what I'm doing. So that's the kind of darkening that I want. Okay, then I'm going to merge it down, call it cables, of course. And then I can do anything with those cables, and what I want to do right now is to create this specific lighting reflection effect on the cables, as you've seen in the original photo of the Erasmus bridge. And it is really easy to do with this panel, because what you have to do now, since you already have the selection of the cables, is to indicate the area that you want to lighten up, roughly with the rectangular marquee tool. Then load the selection of the cables that you already created, and then intersect it with the already present selection. So only the cables will be selected instead of the sky. And specifically that area. And now I'm going to go to creating depth, special effects. I'm going to lighten that part up. Like that. So I'm going to remove the selection edges again so you can see what happened. So this before, and that's after, but this beautiful reflection on the cables, this beautiful lighting effect. I'm going to do it again with the L1. Okay, remove the selection edges again. So you see that, this before and after, and it looks quite nice. So now I'm going to merge it down to the last layer without the adjustment, so I can perform some restore actions. So I'm going to restore it from the bottom to the top, and then from the top to the bottom, and then from right to left, and a little bit from left to right. Okay, now you see that this is the end result of the reflection in the cables. It's easily created like this with the panel. Of course, you also need to work on the selection of the cables, which is a little bit more cumbersome, but that's what you need to do. So before and after, that's the well, not the final result, but the temporary result till now. So just after, what is it, 10 minutes of work. So now I'm going to darken the buildings in the background because they have too much contrast, they are too bright, so the eyes of the viewer will be drawn to those buildings in the background, while I want the viewer to look at my bridge, not so much at the buildings in the background. So I'm going to darken them with the grading feature. So I roughly indicated the area that I want to darken, and then intersected it again with the already created selection of the buildings, because I only want to affect the buildings, of course, and not so much the sky. Okay, so I think this looks dark enough. So the bridge, the white bridge, stands out more from its background and almost looks like it's popping out of your screen. Almost this 3D kind of effect. Okay, I think this should be enough, but I'm going to zoom in now after merging down the layers, because I want to merge it down to the last layer without the adjustment. That's this layer. So the layer with the effect is always on top of the last layer without the adjustment, so I can perform some restore actions now. If you want to know more about the restore actions and how they work, then please refer to the other video tutorial that I created while releasing this panel. So if you look here up close, just before and after, you will see that if I remove the selection, that there's a dark edge over there that I need to correct. But first I'm going to, okay, I made a mistake. First I need to correct it within the current selection, and I'm doing that with the restore feature, like that, a little bit from bottom to top, from top to bottom, and then from left to right and right to left. And then you'll see something like this. So before and after, with a very subtle transition from the area that I didn't adjust to the area that I have adjusted. But there's this black line that you see in the water over there. That is the result of the adjustments. I can easily remove that by roughly creating a selection that's a little bit wider than the effect, than the area that you have adjusted, like that. And then I'm going to use one of the restore features. So with the medium, I think I'm going to go with large, like that, and then it should be done. So look at it right now, before and after. You see that there's no residual noise left in the water, and only the buildings in the background have been affected and are darkened. So that's the buildings in the background. For now we're going to create a pool of light in the water. Again, I'm going to do that with the special effects tool again in the panel. Just create a rectangle with your marquee tool, like that, to roughly indicate the area where you want the effect to be present. And then, of course, I would always do some restore actions, a little bit from bottom to the top, and top to bottom, and left and right to left. But as you can already see, it's already quite subtle. Now I can transform the selection and move it up just a little bit. So now it's right underneath the bridge, exactly where I want the pool of light to be. If I zoom in, you can see how subtle that is. So before and after, it's much more effective than trying to dodge that in the water, for example. Do anything else with it to obtain an effect similar to that. Now I'm going to get rid of some of the banding that you see there, and especially when you transform the selection and move it someplace else, you will see that it will result in some banding in the outer edges of the reflection. So you can easily create that by indicating with your marquee tool an area that's a little bit wider than the original effect. I've done that. Now I need to darken the bridge itself. I think it's too wide. I'm just going to go with grading depth again. So you see that most of the actions that I do with in this photo are done with the gradients in grading depth, because that's the most beautiful way of darkening or lightening specific objects in your image, instead of going with a global adjustment or an advanced adjustment, because they're more there for local adjustments and local darkening and lightening when you don't have any hard edges. So for example, like in the water. but in this case I have a hard edge with the bridge, and then creating depth is the best feature to use here to darken the bridge. And you see that now it's a little bit too dark, so I'm going to merge it down to the last layer without the adjustment, and that's that layer. And I can perform some restore like that, from top to bottom. And now the foot of the bridge, I mean it looks like a foot, is still a little bit lighter. Going to do even more, and there it is then. So the bridge has been darkened as well, and has this nice silvery looking effect. Well, this is the final result of editing this bridge with pre-created mask, using the panel, and then you can have this final effect that looks very similar to the original photo that I took in 2013 and won first prize with the International Photography Awards in 2014. And in this case it just took me less than 50 minutes. Thank you for watching.